Hi there, people, and if I have any friends, also them. Now, this is your dad, and I'm going to attempt to explain our early life. I wish your mother was here too, because everything we have is due to her. Her beautiful, beautiful mother, your beautiful mother, my lovely Mumsy. Just so beautiful. I'd like to thank Jerry Lynn, the hospice worker that brought this to my attention and helped me get it started and put on CD. Thank you much, Jerry Lynn. Now, we sort of organized this a little bit, and hospice had 9 or 10 questions, and what will happen is I will read the questions and then my answers as I see them at the present time. Question number 1, tell me a little about your life history, particularly the parts that you think are the most important. Well, the most important is marrying your mother. That is the most important. But we will start out here with, as I remember things, an absolute jewel. And I miss her. I miss her so much. Just so much. I miss Mumsy. For Mom doing the laundry. And then there was my Grandma Sheehan, who was my mother's mother, or our grandmother. And she was called Ma by all her children, and so as Bud and I stayed with her for several years as we were growing up, we called her Ma, and we called Grandpa Sheehan Pa. So they were Ma and Pa to us as well as the kids. Now, Mom and Dad at that time had a hotel in Reese, and I think it was 3 stories high, a wooden building, and it was called the Bluebird Inn. And it was located right across from where Dick has got his funeral parlor now, right on the corner. And right in back of them was Grandma Sheehan's home, where they had maybe an acre, or maybe it was 2 acres of ground, because they did have a nice raspberry patch. So, or not in the evening really, it was early in the morning, probably 2, 3 o'clock, there was a terrific pounding on the door of the hotel, and we were upstairs sleeping. I can remember quite a commotion at that time, and the man that was doing the pounding was the local sanitation expert, or we called him a honey dumper in them days. He had a couple, 3 barrels on a little wagon that he drove with 1 horse, and he was what was called the honey dumper, or he took care of the privies, the toilets. He cleaned out the outdoor toilets that everybody had in those days. Now his pounding finally woke up Dad, and then Dad immediately saw that there was smoke and flames in his hotel, and it was progressing quite rapidly. I can remember a time of great confusion, and the next thing I remember is on the outside of the building being carried across the street, kitty corner, to our house, which was a little home there, and looking over the soldier of the shoulders of the men that carried me over there, all I saw was a great lot of flame in my mind. In fact, it filled up my mind with flame, and really that's all I saw. And it's a funny thing, but for years I'd shut my eyes and I would see that flame, but so much for a day. And he says, you know, I remember the next morning at the breakfast, or what we called the breakfast, or what we had at that time. Dad was saying, he said, you know, it's funny I should remember this. He said, all we have now, he says, is the clothes on our back. And I remembered, well, I don't have much on my back, so really I don't have much. But Dad made us, I remember he made us a slice of toast and buttered it, and he cut it into strips. And he said, these are little soldiers, he said. You eat these soldiers. So at that time, Dad was utterly bankrupt. He was thwarted in his attempt to build a new hotel, which he had real ideas about it, to be sort of a community building for Reese also. But he was unable to get the permission, and the bank closed him down, and he went bankrupt. So it was decided that my grandmother, Sheehan, would take us over for a little while, and Mom and Dad would get jobs. They would go to Saginaw and get jobs, and they would live with my grandpa Herzberger on Lewis Street until they got a start again and could take us in again and take care of us. So that was the start of really a new life for us, Bud and I, that our grandmother took care of us. And just a few things that I remember while in the care of our wonderful grandmother, and they really took. There was her son George and Ann, I think, were probably maybe freshmen or so in high school, and we got to assume after a few months that Ann and George were our brother and sister. Anyhow, Bud and I remember we slept with George in the back bedroom of Grandma Sheehan's house that was located in the back of what used to be the hotel. And just something I remember there is that I remember as a kid standing in the back door of their shed that was on the back of their home, and it was quite a windy day. And for some reason, I collected the pillows from the house, quite a bunch of them. And I stood in that door, and I unfluffered all them pillows, and the feathers strewed out of there, and it looked like a snowstorm. All over the ground was feathers, white feathers. And somehow Ma and Ann were gone or someplace, but when they come home, they were really exasperated. They didn't know what to do, and finally Ann got the idea of wetting a broom and going around and picking up the pillows and putting them in some sort of a container, and then wetting the broom again and picking up the pillows with the wet broom. And you know, I never was punished for that, which I should have been spanked, but I don't never remember getting no punishment, which I should have. Another time I remember, right in the back of Grandma Sheehan's house, probably maybe 500 feet away, was a gravel pit, and people would come there and they would get the gravel with their horses, their old trucks, and they would pull it out with a sort of I think they called it a drag or something or other, and they would fill it up and put it into their trucks, and away they'd go. Well, after a rainstorm, that gravel pit kind of got filled up with water and overflowed a little bit, and it made quite a pond. There was quite a pond there for a while after a nice rainstorm. So somehow Bud and I, we got the idea of floating on that pond, so we got Grandma Sheehan's tub, a big wash tub, and we took over and we put it on the pond, and we went sailing. And in our sailing efforts, we got out in that pond, and somehow we got on a reef or something, and we couldn't move in, we couldn't move back or whatever, and there we were stranded out in this pond. I guess we hollered a bit, and somebody came, and then all at once I remember a bunch of people, and then they hauled our ship in, and that was the end of our sailing experience. A short end to it, but again, we didn't get punished for that. And again, maybe we should have. I tell these as experiences just to show that in the olden days, it wasn't all a strapping and a punishment. I never remember either Bud or I getting punished for anything. We might have got a little talking to, but never a strapping or anything. For example, how many ladies would do this? One day I remember Grandma Sheehan was canning peaches, and occasionally I'd get part of a peach and I'd eat it, and I happened to get one with a pit in, and I swallowed that pit. Oh, I went to Grandma Sheehan. I said, Ma, I'm dying. I said, I swallowed a peach pit and I'm going to die. No, Howard, she said, you're not going to die. That ain't going to hurt you. Look at here. And she took a peach pit and she swallowed it. I saw it go right down her throat. Now, how many people would do that today? God bless you, Ma. God bless you. I remember, too, Ann would take me to school. I don't know what grade she was in, but she'd take me to school, and the girls would make her girlfriends would make a big fuss over me, and I sure got to like that. Oh, yeah, they made such a fuss over me. Grandpa Herzberger died in 1928, and Bud and I went to live at Lewis Street then, as Dad took over the house at Lewis Street. Now, Dad had a job at Sears-Roebuck at that time, and he worked in the tire and accessory department. So I can still remember Dad at Sears-Roebuck. They were located on Genesee Street, down by the river. And he would go out on Genesee and go up and down the parked cars and check the tires on the cars. And pardon me, when he found one with bum tires, he'd wait around until the owner came back, and I can still see him grabbing the owner by the hand and waving around and taking him into Sears to sell him a set of tires. So Dad was a real good salesman. He sold a lot of tires, and in fact he won a trip to the Akron factory for selling the most tires. And at that time they had been building these dirigibles and airships, and we saw that huge hangar down there and how they made tires. And I remember that it was a very smelly place to making the tires. Of course, there was no OSHA and regulations much in those days. Anyhow, it was a real interesting trip. Now, I can still see Mom there in Saginaw in the dingy basement cutting up Fellsnap soap in the bar in the wash tubs for cleaning soap. And then Bud and I usually would deliver the laundry in a little wagon and collect the 25 or 50 cents and sometimes Mom would put in the laundry a jar of homemade jam or something, and her customers really liked that. Now, when we went to Saginaw, we changed schools, of course, and I can remember Mom, we were taken to the Stone School, and I can remember Mom going from teacher to teacher telling them how smart I was, because I was big for my age and I was a little behind in the grades, because Mom didn't want me to go too many at Reese, because she was afraid I'd get run over by the cars in the big town of Reese. I remember also in Saginaw we always had a police dog. I can remember Amos, the German police, and he would pull us out from behind the Davenport. Bud and I would go back there and lay down, and the folks would say, go get him, Amos, and he'd go in there and pull us out by our legs. And when we'd get in a little fight outside and I got overnumbered, Bud would run in and let Amos out. And when Amos would show up, the kids would disappear, and the battle was over. Then we went to the new Herzberger school, which was just west of us, and transferred there from the Herzberger school to the North Intermediate School. And there was a lot of nice teachers there. They had a bunch of real old teachers. In fact, I remember them. One of them taught us the 23rd Psalm. We had her for our first morning class, and we all repeated the 23rd Psalm. Can you imagine that today, huh? Dad sold Hudson and Terraplanes at the Sutton Sales Company at Genesee, on Genesee Street at Saginaw. And he worked there for a time, and then Humpert Motor Sales at Reese got a hold of Dad, and they wanted him to come to Reese to sell cars. Now, in the middle 1930s, it was a rough deal, I guess. You know, well, I know it was a rough deal. Dad pretty near lost a house, but he took a loan to fix it up, and then he sold it on a land contract, and finally got out with just a few dollars, and we was off to Reese. I can remember the last day that we left Saginaw. We was going out the back door, and I remember Mom looking back, and she started to cry. Now I understand why. Now, we'll go into our life at Reese. We rented a house from a Mrs. Heft, and Mrs. Heft was an elderly lady, and she just needed a few little room by herself, so they partitioned off her big living room, and she lived in that big living room, and we had the rest of the house, and that's where we lived at Reese. I skipped the grade to junior at the 10th grade. I guess I entered as a junior, and I got on a little program there where they helped the poor kids, and we got $2 to $3 a month for 20 hours of work during the month, and that would kind of help with our clothes and so on for school, which it really did. Now in 1937, Mrs. Heft needed all her house again. Her granddaughter was getting married and was going to move in, and so we were out of a house. So Dad had purchased 5 acres outside of Reese on M81, and it was on a contract, a little money down and a little week, and Dad said, we'll build a house out here. And but in the meantime, while we had the 5 acres there without nothing on, we decided we'd raise some tomatoes for Beetle Canning Company at Bay City. So we got the contract, and we had planted the 5 acres of tomatoes, and I remember working. We needed to cultivate the tomatoes, so Mr. Rabier, a little farmer there, he had a horse and cultivator, and made an agreement I'd work one day for him on his farm. In fact, it was then working sugar beets for one day, and then for one day he let me use his horse and cultivator to cultivate the tomatoes. So for a while there I worked, and I was worth as much as a horse. What happened is that the tomatoes, as we took them into beetle, were not just the right grade or right number or something, and when the season ended, we owed beetle money yet for that tomato deal. So Dad, he went to serv-a-pure, and he bought a tent, kind of a large tent, and an oil stove with 2 burners on it, the kind with a glass container to hold the oil. And my Uncle Clayt, Ann's husband, had a small lot on his lot in Reese, where his house was, and he said it was okay for us to put a tent on there and stay in it until Dad got our house done. And we did put the tent on his lot. Thank Clayt for his goodness, and we put a wood floor in it for some reason, and it's a good thing we did when winter came. We didn't think we'd be there that long, but we was. We ran an extension cord from Clayt's house to the tent for an electric bulb, and we started the house in 1937, and we dug the foundations by hand, and we mixed the cement by hand, and we finally got the foundation in. And Dad, he spent several weeks of 1937 in the Veterans Hospital with the illness that he had inherited from the flu epidemic when he was in the Army around 1918, and he got discharged. So anyhow, Dad had enough money to hire a mason for one day, and I tended the mason, mixed up his mortar, and took him the blocks and watched what he did. Now, at the end of the day, unbeknownst to me, Dad said, "Can you do this, Howard?" And I said, "Yeah, I can do it." So that was the end of my days of not doing too much at all. So we had drew up plans for the home. It was a simple home. It was a two bedroom and bathrooms was the future for it. But anyhow, we built the house, and we got the blocks on Dad's credit and the lumber on Dodge's credit from the Reese elevator, and the blocks and cement from Mr. Galena at Munger. Now, the house wasn't done in 1937, and we spent the winter there. And boy, it was chilly. But anyhow, in 1938, I think about in November of 1938-39, we moved into the house as it was. And I remember 1939, the 12th grade I was in, I missed 93 days of the 12th grade working on the house. And at that time I held a record. I don't know, it stood for several years. I don't know if it's still there or not. But anyhow, that's about the building of the house at Reese. Now, in the 71 most wonderful years together. Now, in the 12th grade at Reese High School, I met Arlene in the office. She took care of the office 1 or 2 hours there, and she was also on that poor kid program where you work so many hours a month. Now, I had bookkeeping the last hour, and I remember Miss Mitchell was a teacher, and I would get off. I had all my work caught up a couple, 3 weeks ahead of time in bookkeeping, the credits and all that stuff. You know, it wasn't much to it. So I thought, why do I have to just sit there and do nothing? I could go down and talk with Arlene. But Miss Mitchell, she had different ideas. She wanted me there, and she got so she'd come down and get me, take me back up to the class again. And she told me at one time, she said, Howard, when I first came here, I thought you were the smartest guy in this one-horse town, but now I don't know about it. Well, anyhow, Miss Mitchell, I don't know, renewed, but as it says in the scripture there, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother, and shall become united and cleave to him, his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And that really is, Arlene had really smitten me, and that's what we were going to become for a short 71 years. So anyhow, we, I don't know if perhaps Miss Mitchell knew that I was smitten, although maybe she didn't know, but I liked Miss Mitchell. She was a nice teacher. Anyhow, those 71 years exist as a wonderful few days in my memory. The first year we were married, Arlene worked at Severance Tool with me, and Arlene was a small tool hand grinding precision. We called them burrs, I guess, and I think she made 35 cents an hour, and I worked in the machine shop, and I think I made 45 cents an hour. So actually, when we got married, we were really together 24/7 and building a little business, and married probably twice as long as the average people who the husband would work outside. But these years still passed like a wonderful dream, and I asked Arlene's dad to marry her in December 41, and he said okay. So Arlene said the church was decorated for Christmas, so what we would do is we'd get married on a watch night service, which was conducted on January the 1st. So that's what we did. My brother Bud was the best man, and Irene Arndt, which was Rufus's brother, wife, she was a maid of honor for Arlene. So temporarily we lived upstairs over the blacksmith shop in a small apartment they had in the back. And then after a time we rented a small, we called it the Rife house because Rife owned it. It was about 24 by 24. And then Howie was born in October the 11th, 1942. And Arlene always backed my job changes, which we did to get better opportunity. Worked for Severance Gear or for Saginaw Steering Gear, plant number 1 on Hamilton for a couple years, Severance Tool Company, a welding shop, and Arlene said she never knew what clothes to put out for me. So the folks that gave us a parcel for a house next to them on M81, and Cookie came along then and did very poorly. She did very poorly. She just was scrawny. And then all at once we found out we bought some canned goat milk, and Cookie really liked that and seemed to do real good. So together we decided, well, we'll buy a goat so we can have goat milk for Cookie. So we got a goat magazine and looked through this goat magazine and found out that the Toggenburg goat was a good breed. It gave a good supply of milk and was a hardy breed, so we checked who had some Toggenburgs for sale in this goat magazine. And we found a place in Ohio that advertised them, so we went down there to check on the Toggenburg goat. Now, we happened to get to Mrs. Sandberg, and her husband was Carl Sandburg, the poet, and Mrs. Sandberg had raised or was raising Toggenburg goats. So she had one there, Connie, which was a nice looking goat, and she gave, according to them, 6 quarts of milk per milking, with 2 days, which is quite a lot of milk per goat. So when we came home with a $75 goat, Connie, and we had papers with her, we really took a lot of static for paying $75 for a goat. They said you could buy a cow, the best cow, for $75. Anyhow, Cookie took right off with the goat milk. She just seemed to pick right off of the bat. And I don't know if there's the reason for that could be maybe the goat's milk is naturally homogenized. It has no bacteria, and it tastes good. So we got the 6 quarts per milking, really, and had a lot of milk. So we got a separator to separate the cream out, so we could make cheese and ice cream and whatnot with the milk. And we started to build then people at that time were building garage houses to temporary home for them, where then they would live in the garage house, and then they would build the house behind it or like attached to it. So we built a barn house. It was a gambrel type barn. It was quite large, and we built it to raise goats. I think it was around 36 maybe by 28, something like that. And we built that out of cement blocks and had a gambrel roof. It was really a nice building. And in fact, it's still there. And the owner there had added a couple dormers on it, some new windows, and it looks real nice. It's still there today. And after several years, Cookie was growing up and needed no goat milk, so now this is one of the first times that Arlene ever got perturbed at me, really. And it wasn't really never angry, never an angry word, but we decided that we should get rid of Connie. So a friend of mine, Norm Rife, he said, "Why, you'd take her to the cattle auction at Carroll and get rid of her at the auction." And he said, I'll go with you over to the auction. I never was to an auction before, didn't know nothing about it. So we took Connie over there, and she sold, and then all at once we're getting ready to go, and a riding horse came up, and Norm said, "This is a cheap horse." And what a nice horse that is. And Norm kept saying how cheap it was, and so first thing I knew, I was excited, and I was bidding on this horse. For what reason, I don't know. Norm was very excited, and I got excited, and finally I guess I won the bid, I think, for $85 for this riding horse. And Norm lent me the difference between that and the goat, and a fellow borrowed us a trailer to get it home with, and I took it home and didn't have no place to unload it except at Arlene's grandpa, who had a little farm across the road, but his barn had burnt down, and he only had just a crude shed to put the horse in, nothing for to keep it permanent. So on unloading it, it got out and got into the field. Now this field was right across our house, from our house on 81, and Arlene happened to be talking to Irene, her sister-in-law, and she was telling her about Howard had taken the goat to the sale and got rid of it, and how glad she was to finally get rid of the goat. So Irene said, "Well, how come that if he got rid of the goat, I see him charging around and running after a horse out here in the farm on Grandpa's field?" Arlie said, "Oh no." And so when I got home and took the horse across, finally got it, that Arlene, she never said no angry words, but I could tell that she was unhappy with it. So I thought, well, I would get on that horse and ride it, and I got on the horse and it reared up and I got off, and I tried it again and it reared up and I got off. And the horse's name was Rusty. And I guess Rusty found out that he didn't have to ride me around, he just had to rear up and I got off. And then Norm said, well, he said, let me ride Rusty. So he got on Rusty and it started out at a gallop, and all the once that horse stopped. And Norm flew right over the head of the horse, and his coattails was flying, and he looked like Superman. And I thought, my gosh, he's going to be dead. He's going to hit his head or something and break his neck. So he threw off the horse and finally got up, and he said, oh, that's a smart horse. What a smart horse. We wondered how it could be so smart. And he pointed in front of the horse, and there was a sigh. And he said, look at there. He said, that horse saw that sigh and stopped right in time. Anyhow, Arlene said, we've got to sell Rusty. We got no room for Rusty, which was true. We had no place to keep Rusty. It was getting towards winter, and we just didn't even have a salad for her, a saddle for the horse. Well, we tried to sell Rusty, and I guess not a very good horse salesman. We had one farmer that was interested in the horse and never could come to an agreement on the price. So one time I put the horse in the trailer and took it out to the farmer and was going to make him a deal he couldn't turn down. And when I got out to the farmer, his farm was out on the county line. The farmer wasn't home. Nobody was home. And so I took the horse and went in his barn and put it in an empty stall and left. I left the horse there, and I thought, well, he maybe will just take it and won't say nothing, which he did. He never showed up again, never talked about the horse, and I sure didn't. And the horse was gone, and everything was real fine at the house again without taking care of the horse. We had built a two-big garage in a showroom in the 1930s ourselves with cement blocks, and we had Studebaker in there. But in 91, of course, 92, they quit making the Studebakers for the war, and so we did nothing there. Now, in 1946, we got a hold of the Kaiser Fraser dealership, and I think we had that until about 1950. And then in 1952, I think it was, 1953, Arlene and the family, we got Studebaker for Carroll, for Tuscola County. So it was decided Arlene and I would go to Carroll and take care of the Studebaker dealership, which we did. And we finally ended up with a large house on Burnside, a 3-apartment and an apartment for us, and Arlene took care of the apartments, and she she saved a few dollars rent, and and Philip's allergies got better, and the clothes got white, and we had been taking him to the Dr. Walbot in Detroit, an allergist, and he had been mixing up some solutions, which did no good. So Arlene figured everybody needs this. Studebaker is getting kind of weak because all the independents were. General Motors was putting the real heat on them, and they weren't long for this life. So we figured everybody needs this water. So we became like water evangelists then in that time, 1952, 1950. And people weren't too too well acquainted with the water. It was actually quite foreign to the majority of people. In 1953, we moved to Bay City. We had bought the Culligan franchise out, which had been established in 1946. So what happened then is there's a time for everything, and the water conditioning time was now, and it was time for the direct salesman to sell these units, which Lindsay was the top line at that particular company. So we had Lindsay, and we took off like an evangelist. Everybody needed this here, so we became like a Billy Sunday. So I can remember when we got finally set up and the factory guy was there, we said, well, now who do we go to? And Arlene said, well, let me call some of our car customers. And so she called some customers, and she set up appointments for us. So the factory fellow went out with me and showed me how to do this, and went through a demonstration. And I remember the first customer, we put a rental in his house. I didn't know that we rented them, but the factory guy, he put us in the rental business right off the bat. So anyhow, we started off on the water conditioning business. I would canvass all day and knock doors and set up appointments for the night when the husband was there. Then when the evening came, I would show up and give them the demonstration, and the demonstration is very, very honest and very striking. And I think probably we probably sold about 3 out of 4 if we could put a demo on. But it took a demonstration to sell these water units. So we finally found out about deionizing, which is making water with ion exchange, similar to what we were doing now, but 2 different resins, and making water purer than distilled water. So we investigated that, and through trial and error we got into it, and designed our own equipment. And our own equipment, we got better capacities than the fellow that had been in it for many years. Anyhow, part of our deal was we had to have two tanks, 24 inches in diameter by 10 foot high, and they were made of clear plastic. This plastic had to resist hydrochloric acid and caustic, which is OH. So we finally found the plastic, and we couldn't buy the tanks already made. So what we did is we made the tanks out of flat stock and had seams on them. And the first tanks we made we picked it too thick of a stock to start with, and they bent very hard. And I remember Arlene and I, we called it rolling up a tank. We rolled up the tank and on top of the hoist there, and we would get on that like a Bakken Bronco to roll her up and put the gasket on with our TV, and that was really a sloppy mess. But that was our first tank, and Arlene helped me with it. God bless her. Anyhow, I remember one night we was working down there, Arlene and I, and were listening to the radio where they were playing requested songs, and the neighbor lady next door, she said, I play this for the Herzbergers next door. And it was something about a song then that talked about working on a chain gang. Yeah, we thought that was pretty cute of her. Well, we had little money for research, but your mother and I had fun anyhow, building up the serv-a-pure business. We could go through many a story with that. And also, we developed the first coin-operated water vendor in the United States using this DI water. But people weren't still didn't understand water, and this was in the early 1960s, the late 50s, and the water deal just hadn't came around, and you've got to be on target with something. You can't be too soon or too late. We were too soon. We didn't have real deep pockets to start with, but actually we were just too soon. We actually sold a little bottled water even. We made our own bottling deal. Hospice has a question here. Are there specific things that you would want your family to know about you? Okay. Now, I've loved your mother as she has loved me with an everlasting love. And we've become one flesh. I told her that every day more than once. I would look her directly in her eyes and say, "And you are such a pretty girl." She would smile, a coy little beautiful smile like a little girl. Oh, she's so beautiful. Your mother was a very smart lady and is responsible for getting us in the water business. Your mother and I always wanted the best for you, children, and both her and I have worked hard to that end. We wanted to leave you with more than we had. We did not see where a job with GM steering gear would provide that. In the water business, I would spend time out knocking doors to get an appointment for the night when the husband would be home for a water demo. So, your mother was responsible, really, for raising you children, mostly. You know, I only ever had one good salesman, and I had trained many. That was part of the deal in any direct sales, is keeping salespeople. Now, number 2A, are there any particular things you would want them to remember? Remember your beautiful mother, and I loved you all and wanted the very best for you that we could provide. And remember, it was your mother that is responsible for serv-a-pure. God bless her. Number 3 is, what are the most important roles you have played in life? Well, I would say being the husband of the most beautiful, wonderful woman the Lord ever created for a man, and the father of 4 beautiful children. Number 4, what do you feel most proud of? All the children grew up and were successful, and we left a business that helped them all due to their wonderful, beautiful mother. We helped the kidney patients when they first started in the late 40s to lower the cost of their deionized water for their treatments, because in the early days they paid for most of their supplies. And we made the see-through plastic regen tanks, which still we can't buy them. We have to make our own. And we made the first coin water vendor to vend deionized water right from the source, right on the spot. Question 5 is, are there particular things that you still need to be said to your loved ones, or things that you would want to take the time to say once again? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you all for being so kind to your beautiful, wonderful mother and I. We loved you one and all, and the Lord's best to one and all. Now, how many times can we say, I love you for eternity? How many times? How many times? Yes. Every day, every hour I think of you, Mumsy. God bless you. God bless our 71 years together. Amen. What are your hope and dreams for your loved ones? What else but Mums and I, the Lord's very best, and you all get along in peace and harmony as a beautiful family. Children, I love you all, and Mumsy, sweetheart, I love you so much and miss you so much, and you are such a pretty girl. Question 7. What have you learned about life that you would want to pass along to others? Okay. We will do the best we know at the present moment. If we knew better, we would do better. And we will do better when we repent, change our minds for the better Christ ideas. That is the progress of the human race, even ever so slowly upward. Do not become discouraged, but trust in the divine Christ that is in you. And every human being, but as St. Paul says, I am not yet perfect. Are there words or perhaps even instructions you would like to offer your family to help prepare them for the future? Question 8. Well, this prayer of Ben Franklin always seemed to hit the spot. Powerful goodness, bountiful Father, merciful guide, increase in me that wisdom which discovers my truest interests. Strengthen my resolutions to perform what that wisdom dictates. Accept my kind offices to thy other children as the only return in my power for thy continual favors to me. Now, what instructions could I better give than that? That they all live with love in their hearts towards each other, and all others that are not quite as perfect yet as they are. In creating this permanent record, are there other things that you would like included? Yes, remember this scripture which is inspiring. For God did not give us a spirit of timidity, of cowardice, of craven and cringing and fawning fear, but he has given us a spirit of power and of love and of calm and well-balanced mind and discipline and self-control. The Bible, I figure, is very important because all human experiences are there. Victory, defeat, everything is there. And it all has been recorded for our uplift and keep us encouraged to go on and on. Now, may the good Lord, through the Christ within you, keep all of you in the palm of his hand. Your dead and beautiful mother. And Mumsy, you are so pretty. And may I add this postscript here and give a final thank you to these beautiful girls that work for the Hospice Advantage. There was I can't do it all to all the people. I would use up a couple, 3, 4 CDs just naming names, but there was Ashley Hurley,